There's an unopened envelope sitting on the passenger seat of my car. It's addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Furlow. That's not us. Not anymore. 2 weeks ago, I was brushing my teeth and practicing how to say my wife without sounding like Borat. Now I'm parked in a truck stop in Wyoming, living off vending machine beef jerky, and haven't spoken a word to a soul in 6 days. Let me tell you why. There are a handful of moments in a man's life that split it into before and after. Your first funeral, your first heartbreak, your wedding day, and then, if you're me, the moment your almost wife tells you, I need one last night with my ex for closure. She didn't say it like a confession. She said it like a prescription, like her therapist scrawled it in ink and handed it to her through a manila folder. It's not romantic, she said. It's spiritual. Oh, spiritual. My bad. I stared at her from across the kitchen table. There were 3 wine glasses in the sink. I'd only had one. She explained it like a TED Talk no one asked for. Something about integrated trauma loops and relational identity disassociation, and I think, maybe, I blacked out for a few seconds because I swear I saw my dead goldfish swimming in her Chardonnay. I remember asking, do I get one last night with someone too? You know, for balance? She smiled like a kindergarten teacher. That would defeat the purpose. Of course it would. I said yes. I don't know why I said yes. Maybe because I thought she wouldn't go through with it. Maybe because I wanted to be the secure man she always claimed I wasn't. Maybe because deep down, I didn't want to marry someone who needed permission to betray me, and I needed to prove to myself she was exactly that. She left at 7:42 p.m. She wore the necklace I got her last Valentine's Day. She didn't wear the ring. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't call her. I didn't cry. I wrote a note. Not to her. Not to myself. Just to someone. It said, this is the last time I ever choose someone who wouldn't flinch to lose me. Then I booked a one-way rental, loaded up a duffel with 2 hoodies, a half-used bar of soap, my passport, and the flash drive with our wedding playlist still saved under the name, Forever Tracks Ring. Yeah, that hurt. I turned off my phone. I deleted my email. I disappeared. I left no message. No fight. No scene. I wanted her to feel what absence actually feels like. I didn't expect her to look for me. Not really. I figured she'd spiral for a day or two, play victim to her friends, maybe post a cryptic Instagram story like, some people weren't meant for forever, over a selfie with smudged eyeliner and a wine glass in frame. Then she'd move on. She always moved on. Callie never cried in the rain. She scheduled her breakdowns between yoga and brunch. But something changed when I disappeared. Something twisted. It started on the 3rd morning. I was somewhere in South Dakota, parked outside a diner that served coffee so bitter it tasted like regret. I'd been sleeping in the back seat, using my coat as a pillow and my hoodie as a blanket. I woke up to pounding on the window. Not hers. A cop. Apparently, someone had filed a missing persons report. Gave them my license plate. Said I'd been emotionally unstable. Claimed I'd been expressing violent ideation. I laughed out loud when the officer said that, until I realized he wasn't joking. She said you left home abruptly, left your phone behind. She's worried. I asked him if she mentioned the part where she scheduled a night with her ex-boyfriend 2 weeks before our wedding. He raised his eyebrows. Nope, that didn't come up. We talked. He let me go after I answered enough questions and agreed to call someone, just so they could close the case. I gave him Roy's number. Told him to say I was fine. Told Roy to lie for me, one last time. But that's when it really began. That night, I checked into a roadside motel under the name Elliot Franks. There was no reason for the alias. I just liked how it felt to not be Owen Furlow anymore. The room was small, ugly, smelled like detergent and fried oil. But it was quiet. I took my first real shower in days and let the hot water burn down my back until I couldn't tell if I was shivering or shaking. When I came out of the bathroom, the TV was on. I hadn't turned it on. I froze. I didn't move for a full minute. Then I saw it. One of those cheap motel remotes that turns the TV on when you drop it just right. It must have fallen off the bed. Probably. Hopefully. Except the channel it was on. Local news. Muted. A segment running along the bottom crawl. Bride-to-be speaks out after fiancé vanishes days before wedding. I didn't even need to hear it. Her face was there. Callie. Perfect makeup. Tearful, but elegant. Playing the heartbroken woman abandoned at the altar. She was wearing white. She was wearing white. This wasn't grief. This wasn't confusion. This was a performance. She had made my disappearance her narrative. And I knew, right then, what she was doing. If she couldn't marry me, she'd martyr me. And that scared me more than anything. Because Callie was never careless. She was calculated. If she went on TV, it wasn't because she missed me. It was because she was positioning herself. She wasn't going to call me. She wasn't going to text. She was going to wait until the whole world saw her version of the story, before I even had a chance to breathe. And just like that, I realized something terrifying. I hadn't escaped her. I had only just started playing her game. When I finally stepped away from the motel TV, something inside me cracked. Not broke. Cracked. Like a windshield hit by a pebble. It still works, you can still drive, but you know it's only a matter of time before the whole thing shatters. I didn't sleep that night. Again. Instead, I paced back and forth in a room that felt smaller with every hour. The walls itched. The ceiling buzzed. I could feel her voice crawling through my skull, even though the TV had long gone black. The next morning, I did something stupid. I turned my phone back on. There were 47 text messages, 19 missed calls, 6 voicemails, and 1 group text from my mom that nearly made me throw the phone across the room. Owen, what is going on? We just saw the news. If you're okay, you need to explain. People are worried. You left Callie humiliated. That's not the son I raised. Not the son she raised. Right. Then I saw a new message pop up while I was holding the phone. It was from Callie. No words. Just a photo. A photo of my childhood home. The front porch. The old swing I built with my dad when I was 12. A red scarf tied around the doorknob. Her scarf. My stomach dropped so hard I almost threw up on the carpet. She was there. She was in Oregon. She had gone to my mother. And suddenly, everything made sense. My mom's cold message. Her tone. The passive-aggressive guilt. Callie had gotten to her first. She knew where my family lived. Of course she did. We were planning a honeymoon dinner with my parents right after the wedding. My mom adored her. Everyone adored her. She had the face of a saint and the instincts of a lawyer. That combination? Lethal. I called Roy. First person I'd spoken to since I left. He picked up, groggy and confused. Dude, are you okay? Your fiancée is all over the internet. You're like the villain in a Hallmark movie. She went to your mom's church group. She cried during the prayer circle, bro. I could barely breathe. Did she tell them? I asked. Tell them what? About Hollis. The night she asked for. Silence. Then Roy cleared his throat. No. She just said you had cold feet. That you ghosted. That she tried to be strong, but you just walked out. Walked out. I'd never wanted to scream into the void more than I did right then. My mother had already posted a long Facebook status. A Bible verse about betrayal and forgiveness, conveniently vague, but pointed enough for the entire congregation to know who she was talking about. And the worst part? It worked. People were reaching out. Not to support me. To condemn me. Cousins I hadn't seen in years were sending concerned but disappointed texts. My old boss sent an email telling me he'd heard rumors I'd had a breakdown. Even my college roommate, who once got arrested for shoplifting a rotisserie chicken, was telling me to do the right thing and apologize publicly. She hadn't just twisted the truth. She'd buried the real one under a landslide of curated grief and tearful manipulation. And I'd handed her the shovel. I thought disappearing would give me peace. But all it did was leave behind a vacuum. And Callie? She filled it with a megaphone. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't ready to come back. But the walls were closing in. And there was something darker creeping into my thoughts. What if she wasn't doing all this just to hurt me? What if she was trying to destroy me before I could speak? Because maybe, just maybe, she had something to hide. Something I hadn't seen. Yet, there's a moment when silence turns from peace into poison. The first few days on the road, I thought I was free. I was alone. I was unbothered. I could scream inside my head all I wanted and nobody could hear it. But the longer I stayed gone, the more I realized I hadn't left Callie behind. I'd taken her with me, in every thought, every second guess, every phantom phone vibration that made me reach for a phone I didn't even want anymore. After the photo of my childhood porch, I threw my phone into a river. Dramatic? Probably. But I didn't want her in my pocket. I didn't want to see her name again. And still, I couldn't stop thinking about that night she spent with Hollis. That so-called closure. Something about it had been eating at me from the start. Not just the act itself, but the way she framed it. So calm, so measured, so detached, like it wasn't even for her. like she was fulfilling someone else's demand. And then, one word popped into my head. Blackmail. That idea hit me while I was sitting outside a library in some frozen, nameless town in North Dakota, chewing on the same granola bar I'd been carrying in my coat pocket for days. What if the dinner with Hollis wasn't for closure? What if it was leverage? What if she was covering something up, and I'd been too stunned to ask the right questions? I knew I needed answers, but I couldn't ask her, so I asked someone else. I made a burner Reddit account, posted in a local Vermont community page. The title was vague. Anyone know what happened to Hollis Mathers lately? I expected nothing. Maybe a snarky reply. Instead, I got a DM less than 2 hours later. He got fired. From the theater company. You didn't hear? No, I hadn't. They sent me a link to a forum post, deep web, old post, but it was there. Hollis had been removed from the local troupe for inappropriate conduct. No official charges. No lawsuit. But quiet expulsion. Typical drama circle sweep under the rug behavior. Then another message came through. He used to date someone named Callie, right? I think she was involved. Or at least close to it. There were rumors. I stared at the screen. So now I had two options. Assume Callie just happened to want a night with an ex who got fired for allegedly being predatory. Assume she wanted something buried, and the dinner was more of a negotiation. It explained the tension in her voice when she asked. The carefully chosen words. The way she said, I need to feel like I ended that chapter right. Instead of, I need closure. It wasn't about closure. It was about control. But if that was true, if she was hiding something, then why destroy me? Why go on TV? Why humiliate me? Why turn my mother against me? And then it hit me. She had to discredit me before I had a chance to connect the dots. If I was the man who left his bride days before the wedding, who disappeared and ghosted the love of his life, then nothing I said afterward would matter. No one would believe the paranoid ramblings of a runaway groom. She was preemptively cutting off my voice. And worst of all, she was good at it. I sat there, trembling, furious, hungry, exhausted, and entirely alone. Until I remembered someone. Lexi, Callie's old roommate. The one person Callie couldn't control. They had a falling out a year before I proposed. Something vague about boundaries, but I'd always suspected there was more to the story. Lexi had seen too much, and she didn't like pretending things were okay when they weren't. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year, but I had one of those old Gmail addresses buried deep in my inbox from when we planned Callie's surprise birthday dinner. I took a risk. I wrote her, Lexi, I know it's weird hearing from me. I don't know who else to trust. I think something's really wrong. If you know anything about why Callie wanted to see Hollis again, or what happened with him, please. I need to understand. I'm not trying to attack her. I just need the truth. Owen. I hit send. I waited. 1 day passed. 2. And on the third morning, while sipping a cup of vending machine coffee and staring out at a parking lot covered in ice, I got a reply. Owen, we should talk. But not by email. Call me. And be somewhere you won't be overheard. Lexi's voice shook when she answered. Not in fear. No, Lexi didn't fear anyone. But in that restrained, exhausted way people sound when they've held something in for far too long. Before I say anything, she said, I need to know you're not recording this. I promised her I wasn't. She paused, then said, Good. Because what I'm about to tell you could ruin her career and probably mine if it ever gets traced back. I pulled over into the shoulder of a snowy service road somewhere in Montana. My hands were sweating, even though the air inside the rental car was cold enough to fog the windows. I told her to go on. She wasn't with Hollis for closure. Owen, Lexi said. She was with him because she thought he still had the video. I didn't speak. Couldn't. I didn't even breathe for a second. What video? The one from the night he got kicked out of the theater company. The one he threatened to release when she went silent on him. I don't know what exactly is in it. Only that she looked panicked when she found out he still had a copy. That's why she reached out. Not because of feelings. Because she thought he could burn her life down if he wanted. My mouth went dry. And you're sure she didn't love him? I asked, hating how weak my voice sounded. She was terrified of him, Owen, Lexi said. But not in the way people assume. Not physically. Emotionally. He knew who she used to be. Before the polished speeches, before the career branding, before she became Vermont's darling on daytime radio. Back when she did a lot of questionable things. He had receipts, including that one night. I felt something cold slide down my spine. My jaw clenched. What kind of receipts? She never told me directly. But there was this rumor. One of the actresses in the company overdosed at a party. She didn't die, but it got ugly. Ambulance, police, cover up. And Callie was there. She was the one who brought the pills. Hollis filmed the argument the next day. Her yelling, accusing him of turning on her. Him saying she was done. Then everything just went quiet. No one was charged. But he kept the footage. Called it his insurance. Lexi's voice dropped to a whisper. She said, "If that ever leaks, I'm finished. No one marries someone like that. No one trusts someone like that. No one hires someone like that." I sat there stunned. I remembered the way Callie had asked me about the dinner. How carefully worded it was. How she never used the word romantic, or emotional, or sorry. Because it wasn't about emotion. It was about leverage. She went to him to retrieve the video. That's what closure meant. But if that was all it was, then why frame me as the villain? Why lie to my family, to the media, to everyone? Because she couldn't risk me finding out what she was doing that night. Because if I knew, I might start asking questions. Because if I told the truth, people might realize who the real Callie was. And she couldn't allow that. Lexi kept talking. She told me more. About the way Callie had frozen her out after she confronted her about Hollis. About the sudden job offers, the fancy clothes, the rebrand. About how she had publicly cut ties with toxic people in her past, using phrases like radical self-care and personal growth as a shield against the truth. It was the same pattern she'd used with me. Repackage, rewrite, remove. And I realized something that made my stomach churn. I wasn't the first person Callie had disappeared. I was just the first who refused to stay silent. When Lexi hung up, I sat in my car for a long time. Not crying, not shaking, just thinking. She had taken everything I gave her, my love, my loyalty, my future, and weaponized it. When I didn't fit the image anymore, when I became a liability, she rewrote the script and cast me as the villain. Again. But this time, I had something too. Lexi. The truth. And one final card to play. But if I was going to play it, I had to be smart. Not emotional. Not messy. And definitely not loud, at least not yet. She wanted silence. Let's see how she handles mine when it stops protecting her. I didn't drive for 2 hours after that call with Lexi. I just sat there, parked in the cold, replaying every conversation I ever had with Callie, every moment I had thought was honest. Every glance, every promise, every kiss that now felt like a perfectly rehearsed scene from a play I didn't know I was in. The pieces made too much sense now. Her need for closure, her sudden obsession with image control, the missing night she wouldn't explain, the silence afterward. It was never about me. I was never the point. I was the exit strategy. The convenient, self-inflicted wound she could bleed in front of an audience. But she made one mistake. She forgot that silence only works when no one's watching the quiet. And I was watching now. My first instinct was to go nuclear. Post online. Leak everything. Dig up whatever I could about Hollis and the theater fallout, and make sure she could never manipulate another soul again. But that wasn't the play. That's what she'd expect. That's what she'd prepared for. So instead, I did the opposite. I reached out to the one person who had always been neutral. The only person who'd ever seen both of us clearly without being pulled into the vortex. Daniel, Callie's younger brother. We hadn't spoken since the engagement party. He'd always been the quiet one, the one who kept his distance. Never got involved in family drama. Didn't show up to rehearsals, dinners, or couples game nights. But I remembered something he said once, during a late-night beer run while Callie was passed out on the couch. "You know she keeps score, right?" I laughed at the time, brushed it off. But now, it rang in my ears like a warning I hadn't understood. I found his number in my archived texts. Texted him just 4 words. "I need your honesty." He replied within 5 minutes. "Is this about Callie?" I told him I didn't want drama. I just wanted the truth. He agreed to meet. I drove to the edge of Boulder, Colorado. He was in town visiting a friend from college. We met in a dimly lit diner off the highway that smelled like stale grease and burned coffee. I sat in the booth watching him walk in, taller now, leaner, same quiet eyes. He slid into the seat across from me without saying a word. I started with the question that had been clawing at my throat since everything collapsed. "Did she ever talk to you about Hollis? Recently?" He nodded slowly. "She called me the night she was going to see him. Said it was about tying up loose ends." She didn't sound nervous. She sounded focused. I stared at him. "Focused how?" He shrugged. Like someone going into a deposition. Not a date. Not even a fight. Just an operation. I exhaled, rubbing my palms down my jeans. Did she ever mention a video? He paused for just a beat too long. And that was all I needed. He didn't deny it. Didn't ask what video. Just looked down at the scratched table surface and said, "If she knew I told you that, she'd kill me." I leaned forward. "Daniel, I think she used me to cover it all up. I think she planned to ruin me before anyone could connect the dots. And I think she's still doing it." He didn't respond right away. Then he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a USB drive, and placed it on the table. "I don't know what's on it. She gave it to me last year. Told me to keep it safe, in case something ever happened. I wasn't supposed to ask questions." My fingers hovered above it like it was radioactive. "Why give it to you?" He looked me dead in the eyes. "Because she knew I wouldn't look. She trusted me not to get involved." And yet, here we were. He stood up, tossed a 20 on the table for his untouched coffee, and walked out without another word. I held that flash drive in my hand for a long time before I could even slide it into my laptop. My heart was pounding so loud, I thought the motel manager would come upstairs to complain. It took a few seconds to load. No encryption. No password. One folder. No title. Inside, 3 files. A video clip, a Word document, and a screenshot of an email chain with Hollis's name in the header. I clicked play on the video first. And what I saw? No. What I heard. The second I hit play, I regretted it. The screen stayed black at first. Audio only. The shaky sound of someone fumbling with a camera, voices off-screen, indistinct and low. But then, I heard it. Her voice. Callie's. Not crying, not screaming, cold. Flat. Professional. "You can keep copies if you want. But if this ever gets out, Hollis, I swear to God, I will ruin you in ways you don't even understand." I froze. There was no begging. No fear. She wasn't being threatened. She was the threat. Then came his voice. "Hollis." Nervous. Chuckling. "Relax. I just wanted to see you panic one more time. It's kind of my thing. Yeah, and self-destruction is mine. Don't test me." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She'd made me believe this man had power over her. That she needed one last conversation to heal. To close a chapter. But she hadn't gone there to beg. She went there to negotiate. To intimidate. To cut off the last piece of a past that could tarnish her bright, sparkling future. But then, just as I reached to pause the clip, I heard something else. A sound behind them. Farther back. A gasp. A sob. And then a voice I hadn't heard in years. I didn't mean for any of it to happen. I just wanted someone to talk to. A girl. Young. Shaky. Barely holding it together. "You told me you'd keep it between us. You promised." Silence. Then Callie again, her tone darker now. "And you broke that promise the second you opened your mouth to anyone else. You were an intern. You weren't supposed to be in that room." The girl started to cry. And that's when it hit me. There were 3 people involved that night. Callie, Hollis, and someone else. Someone whose name hadn't come up. Someone who was never in the story she told me. Someone who had likely been erased. Because that's what Callie did. She didn't clean up messes. She removed the evidence that they ever existed. I let the clip play to the end. There was a scuffle. Something heavy being set down. Then Hollis's voice, low and amused. "Man, if your fiancé ever saw this side of you." "He won't," she replied. "He's soft. Predictable. He'll believe what I tell him." And then the screen went black. No credits. No closure. I sat in silence for a long time, laptop open, heart screaming in my chest. I had been a prop in her narrative. A trophy groom. A man she could parade around on social media to prove she'd evolved, that she was stable, committed, pure. But I was never the point. I was the performance. She needed a future clean enough to distance her from a past full of manipulation, blurred boundaries, and voices that didn't get to speak. And now, I had the one thing she didn't plan for. Proof. I opened the Word document next. It was a transcript. Time-stamped. Polished. Ready for a courtroom, if it ever came to that. She'd clearly typed it up herself, probably planning to use it as leverage against Hollis if he ever turned on her. But now it was in my hands. I should have felt power. But all I felt was this unbearable guilt. Because somewhere out there, that third voice, the girl, had been buried by both of them. She'd been collateral. Forgotten. And all I had done was run away when I could have asked the right questions earlier. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about complicity. And that's when the email popped up. The third file. I almost didn't click it. I didn't think I could handle another punch to the gut. But I did. It was short. Just 2 lines. Do what you need to do, Callie. But if I lose everything because of this, I'm taking you with me. H. The timestamp? Just 4 days before she asked me for the closure night. She didn't go to him for healing. She went to neutralize a threat. And I had been the distraction. The human sacrifice. I closed the laptop. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that if I stayed silent any longer, I would be just as guilty as she was. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid. Callie had already taken the worst parts of me. But because I knew what I was about to do would change everything. Not for her. Not for Hollis. For me. I didn't want revenge. I wanted to stop hiding. I wanted the version of myself that existed before I started second-guessing every breath I took around her. I wanted the version of me that wrote love letters and sang along to the wrong key and believed that good people don't need to be managed. And I realized he was still in there. He just hadn't spoken in a while. So I let him write again. I sat at that cheap motel desk with the fake wood finish and flickering lamp, opened my laptop, and I started typing. Not for Reddit, not for drama, not even for the world. Just for truth. I told the story. All of it. I didn't accuse or defame or expose names that didn't belong in the fallout. I didn't post the video. I didn't upload the audio. I didn't even mention Callie's last name. But I told the truth about what happened. About who I was before, during, and after her. About the night she asked me to give her space for closure, and how I gave her silence instead. And then I did something I hadn't done since I left. I called my mom. When she answered, she sounded surprised, hesitant. But I could hear the concern underneath. "Owen," she said, "is it really you?" I didn't cry. I thought I would. But I just smiled and said, "Yeah, it's me. I just needed to go somewhere quiet enough to hear myself again." She didn't scold me. She didn't ask for explanations. She just said, "Come home when you're ready." It was the first time since everything collapsed that I felt like a person again. Not a ghost, not a rumor, not a headline. The next morning, I packed my things. I didn't run. I walked. I went back to Vermont. Not to see Callie, but to meet Lexi in person. We talked for hours. She told me she was proud of me. She said she always knew something was off, but didn't know how deep it went. And then she said something I'll never forget. "You weren't naive. You were kind." She weaponized that. But kindness is only a weakness if you don't know your worth. That stuck with me. So did what Daniel said when I called to thank him for the flash drive. "You were the first person who ever asked me the truth and didn't flinch when I gave it." He and I aren't best friends now, but we're in touch. For the first time, he's living on his own, away from the family narrative Callie built. I like to think I gave him permission to step out of her shadow, too. As for Callie, she hasn't contacted me. Not directly. I've heard whispers. She's trying to rebuild her image, saying things like, the internet misunderstood, and trauma healing is nonlinear. The usual. But the thing is, I don't care anymore. She can have her curated grief. She can live inside her stories. I'm living outside of them now. I started volunteering at a local youth center. I started writing again, not blogs or think pieces or call-outs. Stories. Real ones. Fiction. Messy, human, strange little tales about people who fall apart and learn how to stand again. A few months ago, I met someone new. Her name's Erin. She hates liars, loves thunderstorms, and once yelled at a stranger for littering in a national park. She doesn't tiptoe around honesty. When she disagrees, she says so. When she loves something, we're not rushing. We're just existing. And for the first time in years, I feel like I am, too. So yeah, maybe Callie needed closure. But what I needed was distance. And what I got was freedom. Not the kind that comes from leaving someone. The kind that comes from finally coming back to yourself.